Um, there you go.
Awesome. Well, everybody, it is once again our pleasure to welcome Frank White as our closing speaker for the symposium. Frank is a space philosopher and has been for decades. He is, of course, best known for his work, The Overview Effect, originally published in 1987. It keeps getting longer and longer. It's updated with more and more interviews of astronauts. So in addition to his great thinking in the front part of the book, you can see all of the interviews in their completion at the back of the book. It's a really great primary document from a space history perspective. So many in this community are really grateful to Frank for that, as well as for his contribution when it comes to philosophical ideas. Frank was a student at Harvard University in the 60s, if I did my math right. Frank, you've been involved with Harvard for 6 decades, I think. Now he's been a professor there. It's how a lot of people in this community got to know him as well. We're really grateful that he runs a weekly overview roundtable inspired by his love of Arthurian legend as well, and Kennedy's New Camelot. So we're stoked that this symposium is an offshoot of that. I was sharing earlier today, Frank, that this really came out of the task forces, the proto task forces that we did, and some of the work on psychology and education. So, Frank, thanks for joining us despite having COVID today, and thanks for looking ahead and putting the video together. I want to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mark. You know, there's something about the pandemic that's highly relevant to our conversation today. When the pandemic first hit, people started saying, we're all in this together. They realized that. And that's something the astronauts keep saying. What did I get out of being in orbit? We're all in this together. There's this sense of the interconnectedness of life on planet Earth. And it didn't last for very long here on the surface when the pandemic first hit. But I think there is an understanding that when something happens like COVID, we're all vulnerable. We all have to help each other out. We all have to work together. And so even though I'm very unhappy that I contracted COVID after avoiding it for 2 whole years, I do feel like, well, I'm nothing special, you know? We're all in this together. So I'm trying to work through it. But it is a lesson for us to learn. And I have managed to listen to a good part of the symposium today. And a lot of it is relevant to what I'm going to talk about, which is large-scale space migration. And I want to focus on one session in particular, although all of them have been great, but it's space ethics. And I've made the claim, and I will make it again, that the central ethical question we need to face today is, are we going to have large-scale space migration or not? I think we've been singing the song of, wouldn't it be nice? You know, wouldn't it be nice if we could leave the planet and live in outer space? And I think we need a different song. I don't know what that song is. Maybe we've got to get out of this place, or should I stay or should I go? But what we really need to face is, how serious are we about large numbers of human beings living and working in the solar ecosystem? If we're serious about it, we need to get to work. We also need to think about it as an ethical issue, in the sense that if we understand it fully, it is a way to help the Earth. It's not abandoning the Earth. And it's being posed as an abandonment by large numbers of people. So as you'll see in the video that I'm about to present, which is really a video of the presentation I was going to give you, what we really need to think about as advocates for large-scale space migration is, how do we change the narrative? How do we flip the script? So having said that, I'm going to attempt to share this video with you, and I'll be monitoring the chat if all goes well, and I'll also do the Q&A, and I hope you'll forgive me. This is a compromise, just given my limited energy. And I was in much better shape this morning when I made the video. So I hope it'll be better than trying to do it now when I'm kind of running out of energy. But here we go. Let's see if we can put this together for you. Is everybody seeing the screen?
So far, so good.
Let's see if we can make it go here. I think most of you know what the overview effect is. You may not know how it relates to large-scale space migration, but it really does relate quite closely. But let's just review a little bit. The overview effect has been defined as a cognitive shift reported by astronauts and cosmonauts when they see the Earth from space and in space. This experience is profound. It's not just cognitive, really, it's also emotional. I've had more and more astronauts tell me that it brought tears to their eyes when they first saw the home planet from a distance. And it changes their perspective on themselves, on our planet, and on our future. We're fortunate to live at a time when a new era has begun with commercial spaceflight and with virtual reality and other means of simulating the overview effect. More and more people are going to have this profound experience. Astronauts are different. They're not all the same. So they report the overview effect differently, but there are some commonalities. For example, astronauts know before they leave the planet that there are no borders or boundaries on planet Earth, but it's still often quite shocking to really see the Earth as a whole system and to realize the borders and boundaries are in our minds, not on the Earth itself. Similarly, anybody who lives on planet Earth knows it's beautiful, but once again, seeing it from orbit or from the moon brings out its beauty in a new way. And then there's a constant reference to fragility. Maybe it's not the planet, maybe it's our civilization that's fragile. Most astronauts find the atmosphere to be remarkably thin, and they realize that's protecting us from the harsh environment of outer space. And you know, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, a lot of people were saying we're all in this together because we came to understand that this virus was everywhere, that no one could escape it really. And we're all in this together. And that's a constant refrain from astronauts. Don Lind was one of the astronauts I interviewed for my book, and he said, "You can't see the boundaries over which we fight wars. And in a very real way, the inhabitants of this Earth are stuck on a very beautiful, lovely little planet in an incredibly hostile space. And everybody is in the same boat." That summarizes a lot of what the overview effect is all about. I think to understand the overview effect as an experience, it's important to hear directly from the astronauts. And I was privileged to go to Johnson Space Center in 2019 and interview a number of astronauts. And much of those interviews was caught on video. And here's one with Reed Wiseman that I believe summarizes some of the important points about the overview effect quite nicely.
I had looked at pictures on social media and pictures in NASA archives of the Earth so many times, I actually started to get worried. What if I get up there and it's just like the pictures? I mean, that's going to be weird if that's the thing where I'm like, oh, that's just like the pictures. I'm ready to go home now. And then on the Soyuz, my launch vehicle launched with the Russians. And on my Soyuz, when I first got a chance to look out my little window, which is about right here at the Earth, there's something about looking out a round window at the curvature of the Earth that makes it just more pronounced and really makes it have a huge impact. I just had this feeling like I was way up high looking down, and we were over the ocean, and the blues that I saw, it was ridiculous. I never imagined in my entire life getting to see something that beautiful. It was so foreign for the human mind to look at that, to see that total black of space, to see the Earth highlighted that way. And then I got to see a sunset. I had one piece of paper, it had a picture of my kids on it and a few of my flight data file burn times on it. But I just took a pencil and I drew like 15 curved lines, and I just wrote light blue, darker blue, pink, purple, dark purple, dark purple, all the way down to the surface of the Earth at sunset, because the scale of looking at a sun refracting through the atmosphere, it blew me away, and no picture captured it. There's no high enough dynamic range of a photo to capture what the human can see. So that first look outside completely sidelined me. I had a GoPro and I made a recording with my brother of, no matter how much it costs in the future, come do this. You have to come do this. I mean, it's amazing. Over my 6 months in space, getting to look at the Earth every single day, it shows you something different. Every day it shows you that it's alive. It's a being just like we are. We're guests on this planet. And it's our mother, it's our father, it's our starship cruising around the sun in the middle of the solar system. There was never a moment that I looked out the window and didn't immediately grab a camera and take a picture of something that our planet was doing. It always surprised me. It's always been interesting. I'm a pilot, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a poet, but certainly when you're in low Earth orbit, looking down at the Earth, it doesn't matter if you're a physicist, a school teacher, a stay-at-home parent, or maybe you just backpack for your whole life. If you look out, you're gonna have a magical experience in your own way, for certain.
There are several things I want to say about that clip. One is Reed talked about the Earth as a living organism, and I'm hearing more and more of that from astronauts. This sense that the Earth is alive, and it's a living system as well as a whole system. I would really like to extend that perspective to the solar ecosystem and beyond. Even, in my recent book, Cosmo Hypothesis, I asked, isn't it possible the universe is intelligent, aware, and in some sense, a living system? And doesn't that change how we look at space exploration and space development and space migration? Certainly, if we see our home planet that way, we're going to treat it differently if it's a living organism. And also, I want to mention that these videos became part of a series that NASA did called Down to Earth. very, very successful. And in addition to the short clips, they made a 30-minute documentary called The Astronaut's Perspective, and it was nominated for an Emmy. Now, we didn't win, but it was great to be nominated and to have the honor of at least being considered, and to have essentially the overview effect have that level of recognition by the creative community. Before moving away from the overview effect, one of the lessons of this research is that as we move outward from planet Earth, distance matters. So when you're in orbit, and we see Tracy Caldwell Dyson there in the cupola, looking down at the planet, the Earth fills your field of vision. And that's what we call seeing the Earth from space. But on the other hand, if you look at this Apollo 17 blue marble photograph from back in 1972, that's the Earth in space. And that's really seeing it as a whole system. And as we move further and further away from planet Earth, our consciousness will increasingly be transformed. And that is one of the benefits of the entire space migration movement. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about moving from mission to migration as an idea. We're very focused on missions today, and that's appropriate because that's what we're doing. But if we look at the larger picture, we're looking at the idea of living and working in the solar ecosystem, moving from being a multi-species planet, which the Earth is, to ourselves becoming a multi-planet species. And maybe the most important aspect of this from a social point of view is that we're looking at the opportunity to reunite the environmental movement and the space movement. Years ago in the 60s and 70s, the environmental movement and the space movement were closely connected. Stuart Brand, who created the Whole Earth Catalog, a major environmental publication at the time, challenged NASA to publish a picture of the whole Earth. Why? He knew it would change our consciousness. He didn't call it the overview effect, but that was what he had in mind. We have an opportunity now to move back into that coordination, but it's going to take some rethinking of what space migration means, what environmentalism means, and that's our challenge today. For that, we again have to go back a little bit to 1972, the late 60s, early 70s. A group called Club of Rome commissioned a study at MIT, a series of computer simulations that showed humanity might be on the verge of overshooting the carrying capacity of the Earth. In other words, our highly technological civilization might just be too much for planet Earth to manage. Again, if the Earth is a living organism, it's like any organism, it can only deal with so much before the immune system is overwhelmed and it collapses, really. And this led to a book called Limits to Growth, and the idea that we needed to limit our growth in order to preserve the planet. Well, there is another alternative, and that is to include in our modeling and in our thinking the idea of large-scale space migration, because one of the variables that is really taxing the carrying capacity of the Earth is population. And it's not just individual human beings, it's everything that it takes to maintain a human being at a high level. And Large-scale space migration simply means we move from a terrestrial ecosystem outward into the solar ecosystem. Also, it does not mean abandoning planet Earth. Planet Earth is part of the solar ecosystem. So we do it with overview effect awareness, and we do it with the mantra, we are all space environmentalists. Gerard K. O'Neill, who was a professor at Princeton University in the late 60s, had begun already to look at the possibility of creating space communities in the late 60s. And he was inspired in part by the Limits to Growth publication, because he realized that in order to avoid collapse on the Earth, if it were a closed system, would require incredible control over human beings and human societies. And so he began to think of space communities as an alternative. He founded Space Studies Institute, and he began to spread the idea of humans moving out into the high frontier. Now, Multiverse Media, which happens to be the publisher for the Overview Effect, incidentally, Multiverse Media has made a fantastic documentary about Gerard K. O'Neill, and I just want to play the trailer for you.
We're on a very fragile planet at the present time. These are the most dangerous decades in all of human history. We have the capability to destroy ourselves, and yet we have not broken free of the limitations of that thin biosphere of the Earth. Now, some serious scientists are talking about whole colonies in space. Not on the moon, Mars, or Jupiter, but on man-made planets, and populated not by scientists and astronauts alone, but by hundreds of thousands of just plain folks looking to get away from an overcrowded Earth, running short of energy, water, and clean air.
The human race must leave and occupy other places in space. Do you really believe we can be there soon?
With the technology that we have now, we could do it, and maybe by the late 1980s.
Talking about outer space and colonizing outer space is always intriguing, and here's a gentleman who knows about it. Would you welcome, please, Gerard K. O'Neill.
Dr. O'Neill rolls out this book called The High Frontier that shows how to do it, step by step, and it's go time. Anyone can read the book. That will change how you think about space forever.
It's possible to make habitats which are relatively big enough to be very Earth-like.
90% of the people on Earth in 100 years would move out into space, leave the Earth. We call the Earth the old country.
Gerry O'Neill has given a planetary surface the right place for an expanding industrial civilization.
The episode of human life being confined to Earth is coming to an end. Space will be the next civilization.
Industries and colonies in space may sound incredible, but we who are working toward them know that most of the building blocks are already in place.
Gerry O'Neill is a physicist with a brilliant reputation among his colleagues. O'Neill might have stayed in that abstract world, but he has always been intrigued by space.
Gerry had a dream of going into space, and he went through the whole program, all the rigorous, grueling physical and psychological tests.
I was really worried that O'Neill's influence and his greatness has not been publicly understood. But then if somebody with the wherewithal of Jeff Bezos actually tries to implement it, that's transformational.
It's this generation's job to build that road to space. Professor O'Neill was very formative for me. I read The High Frontier in high school, and as soon as I read it, it made sense to me. Space isn't just something that's just the engineers show up to. You know, this is something for artists and writers and business people. We were a bunch of young, intuitive punks. We're all Gerry's kids. We're all, in one way or another, caught up in this idea.
3, 2, 1, 0.
yes, it was crazy. Yes, it was science fiction. Yes, it was way out there, but the steps were there. It just was hard work. And all of us were willing to do the hard work.
We, you and I, are the only people who will ever have the privilege of saying we explored the solar system first.
This concept is so enormous in its scale and the change of human events that's going to happen inevitably as a result of this.
Very important that it be about everyone, that we stay true to Jerry's vision. We're all Jerry's. That's something to be excited by and a legacy that we can all live into.
Life is extraordinarily rare, extraordinarily precious. Opening the high frontier means making possible and ensuring the survival of the human race.
So we don't use the term colonies anymore for obvious reasons. That term has negative connotations for many people, but when we think about the term space communities, I think it makes a lot of sense. And it is still something that we can realize if we look back at what Jerry O'Neill was proposing, which was building these space communities out of extraterrestrial materials, like the asteroids. And many leaders of today's space movement came together at the Space Studies Institute. And it was an early version of a vision of space migration with the explicit goal of benefiting the Earth. Jerry talked about returning the Earth to some sort of ecological balance that it hasn't had in a very, very long time. And this would involve people and industry moving off the planet, making the Earth sustainable again. And it's important to understand, I think, when we relate it back to the overview effect, I wasn't thinking about astronauts when I had the idea. I was thinking about people living in an O'Neill community and seeing the Earth in the sky all the time. I wasn't thinking of it as an extraordinary experience, but an ordinary experience of future space dwellers. And so there is a very tight connection between the overview effect and large-scale space migration. The reason that I began to interview astronauts is that the overview effect is also a systems theory. My hypothesis was that these future space dwellers would think differently. They would be systems thinkers. They had a different space philosophy than we do living on the surface. There were no such people then. There really aren't any such people now. And that's why I began to interview astronauts as proxies for the future space people. What we need to do today to get people on board with this vision is to flip the script. Today, space exploration, space development, or space migration is tightly connected to the idea of abandoning the Earth. That is the farthest thing from my mind, and I hope it is the farthest thing from yours. What if space migration were seen as a way to restore, to honor, to support the Earth? What if large-scale space migration were seen as an ethical imperative? Right now, if you say, I'm interested in space, I'm interested in exploration, I'm interested in space migration, the listeners will demand that you explain it. Why? Why do you want to do that when there are so many problems on Earth? If we can flip the script what we can do is ask people, why do they want to stay here when we know that our current civilization is creating such a burden on the Earth's carrying capacity? We really are looking at an ethical and moral imperative, and we have to decide which side humanity is going to be on. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't do everything else we can do to support the carrying capacity of Earth. For example, many people have pointed out that eating meat and everything that's associated with eating meat is also a burden on the carrying capacity of the Earth. So, without getting into details about that, there's a lot we can do there to make things better for our planet. All I'm really saying is, let's not eliminate space migration as one tool for helping to preserve our home planet. Now, as you know, Human Space Program is a sponsor of this event. And the Human Space Program also grew out of my book, The Overview Effect. And it is now a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We intend to create a central project for all of humanity as a unifying force as we move beyond the overview effect. And our goal is creating a blueprint for the sustainable, inclusive, and ethical exploration and development of the solar ecosystem through large-scale space migration. And I want you to know, we are taking the original Club of Rome computer model and expanding it into the solar ecosystem. We're going to be able to run a lot of different scenarios, just as was done in 1972, but a new variable will exist, which is space communities. And I just want to say one more thing about that. When I talk about space communities, I want you to think of the Earth as the first space community, because we are in space, we have always been in space, and will always be in space. So we are now creating new space communities, but not the first one. So in conclusion, we've achieved an overview of planet Earth, and let's not forget how incredibly important that is. And now we're taking the next step, large-scale space migration. It's not just for astronauts, it's not just for technology people, scientists, it's for everybody. And we've got a number of really critical choices ahead of us. We need to get everybody on Earth involved. We can't leave anyone out. This can't be for the elite. It has to be for all of humanity. And the big choice is, are we going to stay home? Are we going to make a new home out in the solar ecosystem and beyond? Thank you very much for all you are doing to help realize our vision. This has been a great symposium, and look forward to sharing ideas with you in the future. Thanks again, everybody. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. That guy sounded a lot like me, didn't he? I've never actually sat through one of my own presentations. Anyway, I hope it opened up the possibility of some conversations with you. If you don't remember anything from that presentation, it's pretty simple. Flip the script. You know, we've got to change the dialogue from you got to explain to me why you want to leave to you've got to explain to me why you want to stay. It's just that simple. But hopefully there's some more thoughts there that we can discuss. So we're open for conversation. Questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When you mean by flipping the script, you're just talking about encompassing everyone in this new space adventure we're working on instead of just simply the elites? Is that what you're talking about?
That's part of what I'm talking about, but that is not exactly what I mean. I do want everybody, and certainly the human space program is about involving everyone. No, what I'm really getting at is changing the narrative from, first of all, the idea of large scale space migration or even space exploration at this point is about abandoning the Earth. Those of us who want to advocate space exploration or space migration, we're seen as wanting to get away from the Earth. Flipping the script means no, we want to move out into a larger ecosystem to preserve the Earth. So it really is, it's really summarized in two words: abandon or preserve. And we have not succeeded in the mainstream yet to get large numbers of people to see it in the way that I've just presented it, which is, and the way Jerry O'Neill presented it. This concept has been there for 50 years. How to do it, as one of the people in the film said it, Jerry showed us how to do it and it was go time. It's still go time. If we have the will to realize this vision, we can do it. You know, Jeff Greenblatt talked about it too. I heard his talk, and I'm working with Jeff on this new computer model. We know how to do it. We know it can be done. And it's very similar to Apollo. I mean, nobody, actually with Apollo, nobody knew how to do it, but there was a commitment and people figured it out. So it's just really understanding the value of it. I think that's important. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I guess from my perspective, because I've worked in the industry a little bit, that it felt like it was the governments are the only ones that can do this. The governments are the only ones that can achieve space travel because it's so expensive and so dangerous. And that was true for many decades until finally a few folks were able to shake off that mindset and allow private industry to take a chance and find people with enough wealth, enough marketing savvy and financial savvy to push things over the edge, shall we say, so that others besides governments, agencies can actually fly into space. As we've seen with the SLS system, it's taking 20 plus years and multiple renamings to get where they are, where they, at least they're on the launch pad finally. That's nice. But, you know, there's no incentive for speed like Apollo because there's no race. It's just us. But private industry does have an incentive for speed. It's called profit. They want to get up there and do things and maybe make some money along the way. But it's not going to be just, I mean, the challenge for us is to manage that greed incentive so that we can also humanize the effort too. That's my opinion.
I would have to agree with that. And, you know, again, just a little bit about the human space program. We want to create a sustainable plan that includes everybody, and that means government and private industry. One of the things that I've talked about before is, if you need to understand what we're talking about, on the Earth, we have planners and developers. They work sometimes in conflict, sometimes together, but you really need both. If you only had planners, you'd never have any development. If you only had development, you would probably regret some of the outcomes. So you need both. And we want to be the planners for the solar ecosystem. Government's still going to play a role, I think. However, as you point out, it's never going to, large scale space migration is never going to be done by the government alone. So we need all of these different motivations to make it happen. But let's keep our eye on the prize, which is we know the Earth has significant problems. What we're not seeing is the source. And, the source to some extent is this incredible civilization we've created. And, just as, people talk about, well, humans weren't meant to live in outer space. We weren't evolved to live in outer space, but a planet like the Earth wasn't really meant to support such a high-tech civilization either. So I don't want to go on and on because there are a lot of hands up, but Motasham, I'm sure I didn't get your name right, but go ahead.
Thank you so much. My question would be, what is your perspective regarding the student engagement about the overview effect?
Could you repeat the question because I couldn't hear?
Yeah, definitely. My question is, what is your perspective about the student engagement regarding the overview effect?
Did you say student engagement?
Yes. Like,
What is it?
how
What
does
is their perspective on student engagement regarding overview effect? Did I get that right?
yeah, it is.
I want to support students to get involved. One thing I did not mention in my talk, because I was really focusing on migration, there's actually a movement, and I think everybody here is at least part of this movement. There's a movement to bring the overview effect down to earth. What does that mean? It means sharing this astronaut awareness about what they have seen and what they have learned, bringing that down to earth. And just for an example, Anahita is working, and I'm supporting her in every way I can to bring the overview effect into psychotherapy and psychology. And as was mentioned in the chat, Anahita and I have written a book for children called Star Sailor. We're hoping to get the overview effect perspective into the minds and hearts of young people. And as you know, Mark is working and has literally written the book on space education. So students, we welcome you. Join the movement and help us spread the message of the overview effect. It's not my message, incidentally. It's the astronauts' message. It's what they've seen. It's what they felt when they've seen our planet from a distance. And, it's just, what have they seen? I recently did a commentary on this. They've seen the truth. If you want to summarize it in one word, it's the truth of who we are and where we are in the universe. We're not on a stable platform with the heavens revolving above us. We're on a spaceship. And as Reed Wiseman mentioned, it's a living spaceship. And we're never going to solve the problems of the planet unless we understand the truth of where we are. So I would welcome you, and let's talk more offline about how students can get involved, because I was a member of the student movement in the 60s. I know how powerful students can be. So the more students, the better. Omar.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, Omar.
I was just curious, as you watching your presentation, if you could perhaps speculate on what is the payoff of continuing the narrative that we have today, which is, there's this, abandonment of Earth, or right. We want to go to space. We trash the planet. We're going to go find a new one, right? I'm just curious if you had any ideas on that.
Well, I mean, giving those who advance that narrative their due, I think they're sincere. One of the realities here is that people aren't really opposed to space exploration. You know, our good friend Mike Simmons says that astronomy is a form of space exploration, and it is. There's almost nobody opposed to astronomy for the most part. There are conflicts when people try to build astronomical observatories on indigenous land. That's an issue. But generally, people support astronomy. There's not much opposition to robot probes of the solar system. The conflict comes when people imagine large-scale space migration, which is large numbers of humans leaving and going to other planets. And the concern they have is that, number one, it will deter people from doing things here on planet Earth to improve conditions. It'll just be, okay, we destroyed one planet, let's go to another one and let's just keep doing what we've always done. That isn't what we're talking about. And the other issue is they do have a right to ask us to prove that we won't make a mess of the solar ecosystem. And that is up to us. I think we really do have to do that. And again, I would refer back to Jerry O'Neill's idea that building on planetary surfaces is not the best idea. And if you think about what O'Neill was talking about and what Jeff Greenblatt talked about today, without using up a lot of extraterrestrial materials, we can build these freestanding communities, space communities, and have a very light footprint on other planetary bodies. So that is my appraisal of the current narrative, without ascribing any negative motives to it. And I think that's the way I'd like to have the dialogue go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Thanks. Thanks, Omar. Paul?
Oh, hi.
Hi, Paul.
It's so great hearing today's presentation as you give your presentation, and I've learned deeply a few things that maybe I can comment here. One of them, it's just a matter of time before you overpopulate the earth. That's given, because there are more children born than people die. And to me, instead of talking about depopulation, the best thing that we need to talk about is to migrate. Because not only do we protect the planet Earth, we also protect the human gene. Every bio-living thing, a plant pollinates its seed and makes them fly away so that there will be longevity and success of its own gene. A lion cub, upon maturing, moves away from its mother's den to make sure that the gene succeeds. Our moving away to another planet is the best chance for the human race to survive. The United Nations is talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. To me, and after your presentation, this is the best climate action plan ever. Thank you.
Paul, I really appreciate you. And for those of you who don't know, Paul is joining us from Africa, from Kenya, right, Paul?
Nairobi.
Nairobi. And he brings a global perspective to this work. You know, I would just add to that, that it really is true that a lot of what we're talking about is natural. You know, one of the metaphors that's been used in some of my interviews with astronauts is this idea of the cosmic birth phenomenon. I think that was Rusty Schweikert who talked about that. And I know Tsiolkovsky talked about, this is the womb of humanity, but you can't stay there forever. So the departure of humanity and other species from the earth, again, it's not an abandonment. When that lion cub moves away from its mother, it's not an abandonment, it's a continuation. And so if we could only begin to see it that way and begin to trust ourselves to do it right, we would see a great adventure ahead, rather than something to be concerned about. So thanks a lot for that perspective, Paul. I really appreciate that. Akaya?
I think it's Kayla.
Kayla, sorry. My
Hi,
eyes are not
Frank.
functioning very well.
That's okay. We hope you get better really soon. You're doing amazing for having COVID.
Thank you.
Better than many of us did in the process.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. Let me come on here. So yeah, I have two thoughts. One is Jerry O'Neill's idea of creating these space stations, essentially like the International Space Station. We've already done that, and creating the man-made other places. So one thought was, I kind of wondered, like, well, what happened to that idea where now we're all we're doing and talking about is colonizing Mars or colonizing the moon, more likely colonizing Mars or attempting to. And the other thought was in response to his thought that there's nothing to stop us, and what you were saying as well. And it's the same thing with now the Dark Sky Initiative, which had their conference concurrent with ours today. And all of the environmental problems that we have, whether it's poverty and kids dying one every second of not having enough food, when we have all the solutions on the earth, we have the solutions to the environmental crisis, we can farm differently, all those things, there's nothing stopping us except our own psychology or our own will or our own consciousness. And that sort of parallel between those two issues, it's like it goes back to changing the consciousness of the human race and enough to realize that our frontiers, whether for changing the nature of how we're living on the earth or going to space, both of them are accessible. And that frontier, and I know Anahita is working with that, and many, many different groups are working on that frontier of looking at human consciousness and how we can change it, because the rest of it is an open door. That's my thought.
I'm glad you brought that up. I've often said that the only way I know what I think is to write a book. And one of the things I learned in writing the overview effect, and that was back in 1987, was that the real purpose of space exploration is changing human consciousness, if you want to boil it down to one thing. And I'm talking about exploration now as opposed to migration, although they're tightly coupled. And the overview effect is a change in consciousness, as anybody, I know you heard an incredible panel of astronauts today. That's what the astronauts talk about, really. They may not use the term, but it's a change of consciousness. And we see it with the new commercial astronauts. They come back changed. William Shatner is a great example of that. There's been a big focus on some of what people consider his negative comments, but that's not the point. He came back seeing the earth in a new way, and he ended up, if you read his book carefully, he ended up in a hopeful vein. Virtual reality is another way of bringing this new consciousness into the world without sending large numbers of people into orbit. So you're absolutely right. And if we can create this change in consciousness, number one, we can restore the planet. And number two, we can move off of the planet in a way that will be environmentally and ethically sustainable for the rest of the solar ecosystem. So I think you've touched on the number one key issue that we have to think about all the way through.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, Frank. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Yeah, I just want to share something that we've talked a little bit about before, Frank. About 12 years ago, I asked astronaut Grunsfeld how many people needed to see Earth from space in order to change the world. And he said 535. So that was pretty good. We go, that's how many people are in Capitol Hill. But he said, they'll never go. So I think that we need to change the answer or the question a little bit. I just recently ran for city council here. They're still counting the votes. Okay, what can I say? But I came across something that another city nearby is doing. And we have a lot of stormwater problems here. And in order to mitigate stormwater, they're going to stop trying to fix it where it hits the drain, but go back on the property where the source is on private property and fix it. So the city government will go on private property to fix this. It took 2 iterations of their city council. It was a tiny town, 1,200 people. It took them like 4 years to get a city council on board with this idea. So in the same way, it's more important to perhaps, you talked about having an overview effect political party, right? And so, so whether we fly as many people to space as we can, or we VR them as much as we can, that we maybe should encourage more people to, you can still be a Democrat, you can still be a Republican, you just can lean overview effect. Okay. Because, anyway, I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to take a moment. I hope everybody will applaud Elizabeth, who has been coming to our roundtable meetings and participating. And it's easy to be a space philosopher and to write books and talk about this. It's not very easy to run for office. And whether there's an overview effect political party or not, Elizabeth, I believe you are the first overview effect political candidate in history. And whether you win or lose, we're going to be there for you. And I hope you win, but I know you had an impact, and we really appreciate that. And I totally support you. And oh, here's my little friend. Hi, Maisie. Hi, Maisie. Maisie also, I know. Maisie wants to remind you that Laika was the first being to orbit the planet, the first non-human. She is very strong on the role that dogs have played in space. Thank you, Maisie Dobbs. But you're right. If we could infuse the parties, whether they're Republican or Democrat, with the philosophy we're sharing, that'll do it. And it doesn't have to be at the congressional level. It can be at city council levels. And I hope other people will will be inspired by what you're doing, Elizabeth. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you. Yes, it is hard. You think space is hard.
You remember what Kennedy said, John Kennedy said in his famous, "We choose to go to the moon." We do these things not because they're easy, but because they are hard. So,
yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Martin, looks like you might have the last word here.
I'll be brief. Frank, thanks for, I really enjoyed your review of O'Neill, and more importantly, that era of thought. that I think is not in our political discourse necessarily now. And I just have a point of clarification, and maybe it's a misunderstanding on my part. But also two other guys from that time period would be Buckminster Fuller, I put in that category, and Kenneth Boulding. And they both had two different takes on the spaceship concept, the spaceship Earth. My understanding is of Buckminster Fuller's spaceship Earth is that it was not a closed system. It was an open system and an abundant space, solar-based, star-based cosmic energy income of the universe, these ideas. And that was his manual, Operation Man, Spaceship Earth, I think his book was called. And I'm just wondering if I have that right, or if you subscribe to that world's view of Buckminster Fuller, or are you more into, I guess O'Neill would be more closed loop, at least for the Earth. But for the solar system, it seems like there's an open door for being open-based or abundance-based if we're talking about the solar system as a system based on the abundance of the sun. And then Kenneth Boulding, people may be less familiar with him, but my understanding is he had his spaceship, he used that term spaceship Earth in the closed loop sense, I guess, as did O'Neill when he was referring to the Earth. Do I have that right? Or is that a distinction that you make, in your thought going forward, or do you not make those distinctions with Buckminster?
Well, I was very influenced by Bucky Fuller before I was influenced by O'Neill. And I guess in my mind, I think that the Earth really is an open system, actually, in the sense that it is part of the solar ecosystem, and it's influenced by what we call space. One of the things that I pick up from all of the astronauts that I've talked to, they all talk about how thin the atmosphere is. And excuse me, they really talk about how open the Earth is to space, what we call space. And in my own mind, it's like the borders and boundaries issue, where we know there are no borders and boundaries until we get out there and then we see, oh my goodness, there really are no borders and boundaries. And I think that it really is an open system, and it's a closed system only in our mental framework. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's my perspective. Does that work in terms of answering what you asked?
Sure. I mean, the other figure in that era, I think, was Glaser with his father's space-based solar power. And and that's been a whole movement. That's a whole other part of the space community. And they operate, if I'm making maybe it's a distinction that's not there, but my review of if there's a divide within the space community or amongst humanity, it's this abundance based versus scarcity based. And I was, wondering if you look at space solar power from an overview effect as part of the same connection to our connection to the sun's power.
Yeah, and it's now an idea that's finally getting some attention, actually. No, I think the distinction you're pointing to is accurate, that there is that distinction. Personally, I think it's a distinction that we need to get over, and we really need to see the Earth as part of the solar system and indeed part of the universe. And it really is an open system.
That's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and interject, and maybe everybody can use the applause button. And if you're on camera, let's see it. But thank you to Frank for coming and sharing with us today, especially while on your sick bed. I think you just sat up on the couch for this hour. But thanks for planning ahead with the video and everything. It's fantastic.
It's my first time to sit up all day.
Oh man! Well, you
for a
couldn't
good
tell.
cause.
It was like being in the round table. And thanks to everybody who contributed as well. I am going to share my screen one more time to bring a sense of closure to the event. I think that sort of zoom out moment that Frank was just describing really speaks to his additional philosophies of leading to the Cosmos hypothesis, which I highly encourage everyone to read. But that led directly to the founding of the Human Space Program, which has at least given us the blessing to do this event in their name. So we're grateful for that. If you head on over to the humanspaceprogram.org, you can click on Get Involved, and there's a lot of great ways to be involved in the movement. And there's a lot of folks here in the room that are working on this as well. I did mention Frank's book earlier. There's a lot of book recommendations flying in the chat. But if you haven't read it yet and you don't have it on hand as a primary document reference, pick up a copy of The Overview Effect. Share it with folks in your community. I was remembering when Elizabeth was talking about running for office just now. Before she ran for office, she always had stories of engaging people everywhere she went, in line for coffee, you name it, to talk about space. That's the way it's got to be done. And Frank and Anahita worked together on the children's book. If you want to share it with the next generation, highly recommend Star Sailor. So check that out. And of course, I've got to share my own book. If you want a more academic approach to space education, Frank also was kind enough to write the foreword and edit the lion's share of the book as well. And a couple of free resources for you. If you go to spaceprize.org/education, you can find the free and open education resource that we authored over the past year there. If you print it out as a PDF, this is a 550-page textbook, so it's legit, and there's thousands of links. It is a great place to connect the kids in your life or yourselves with a lot of great stuff happening in space today, from the importance of the environment to the new space economy and space philosophy issues like these. I also, in just a moment, I'll drop another link into, I have a spreadsheet of 80 space education resources. Another hat tip to Elizabeth, this was her idea last summer, and we had some Space Prize interns actually put it together last December. So I want to be sure to share that with you guys in the large session too. So thank you again to our partners, including the Human Space Program and Anahita's group at Earthscape VR, and to my co-founders, my team at Aries Learning, for being a part of all of this. And particularly thank you, Anahita, and thank you, Ron, for putting this event on with me for the second time now. This is really fantastic. And thanks to everybody who presented. We had 20 presenters. We had about a dozen moderators today. So thank you to everybody who participated and presented and moderated. Thank you all for being here. We're going to go ahead and wrap up right now. I'm happy to stick around for a couple of minutes. I don't know that I can speak for Ron, who's hosting the event. But we'll stop the recording here and let everybody have their